Hello and welcome to another episode of the Atom Podcast. I am Ollie Thompson and today I'm joined by James Seymour, Head of Engineering at Jetstone Asset Management. Hello, James.
Well, it's great to be here.
Well, James and I have just had a bit of a joke. So James didn't realise, but about 2 minutes before we started this, a builder's come to James's house to start drilling up some holes. So there will be some intermittent drilling in the background, but it's work from home. I think we've been used to this now for the last 9 months. It's nice to see we're all normal. We've got an office behind James with plenty of books. Are you going to admit that you've read every single one of them, or are they?
I am, because fortunately you can't see the titles, but we've got two young girls, and a lot of them are all about tigers who come for tea, and so on and so forth. So.
Not educational whatsoever for us, but brilliant.
Oh, I mean, mandatory reading. Yeah, if you want to be where I am today, these are the core texts.
Awesome. So James's background is really interesting. To give him a bit of an introduction, James graduated. He's worked in 2 or 3 different aspects of finance and really technology in general. So joined Lehman's for a few years. He then joined G Research for just over 12. He then took a year out of finance and went and worked in arguably one of the best technology firms in sort of globally, I guess, but they're more sort of entertainment and gaming in Probable. And then for the last 3.5 years, he's been working at Jetstone. So it was actually something I was really interested in asking you about. But I know Jetstone today, the 2020, 2021 Jetstone. But in 2017, when you joined, how different of an environment was it back then to what it is now? And was it a completely different conversation that you had with the CEO at the time, I presume, about maybe coming into something that's not yet there, but you coming on to build it?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I know you want to talk about a little bit more later as well, but it was an opportunity. So I was at Improbable. As you say, it's a great company, really interesting. I think it is predominantly gaming, although there are some other aspects of the simulation world that they're really interested in. But yeah, the CEO of Jetstone, he'd set up an asset management company back in 2014. And by 2017, he was ready to move on to the next phase of that journey, which is moving to quantitative systematic trading. And he and I started having a conversation, and it seemed like an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. I was like, yeah, go in, start, and take all the lessons that I've learned of, being involved in a technically sophisticated shop and apply them to a completely fresh build out. It's like every engineer or every technologist's dream, right? Greenfield project. I would say be careful what you wish for. So yeah, joined and had all these ideas about instantly deploying vast compute farms, spinning up petabytes of data. But the reality is, of course, that I joined a company that was pivoting from discretionary into systematic. And that was a really interesting kind of challenge, because I had to build a team, work with everyone in the business to help that pivot. But yeah, it's 3.5 years on, and it's going really great. And we're still, really early stage of that journey. So it's genuinely exciting.
Well, one of the most refreshing things about you from knowing you is that you see a lot of people in this industry at the level that you are now, heading up the engineering teams for global funds. And you're probably one of the most, not just down to earth, but probably the most technical individuals that I know at management level. And it seems like throughout your entire career, as much as you have done management, you've always been engineer at heart, haven't you, really? I think that's been the main sort of consistent trait that I found in yourself, that it's always been technology at the heart, and people management and leadership comes as a result of that. So I'm really interested in, and I'm sure everyone else is, in understanding how you actually got from being an engineer into then sort of experiencing leadership for the first time. And there's a pretty interesting story, I think, isn't there, behind how you initially sort of experienced leadership. But even before that, let's talk about the start of your journey. So you left university, you joined Lehman's. So this is at a time, 2001 to 2003, pretty big global crisis happened during that time, right?
Yeah. So Lehman's is really interesting. So this is way before, obviously, 2008. So Lehman's were firing all cylinders. They just turned 150 years old. So when I went there, I went there initially as a summer intern. We were all invited to the Millennium Dome, which embarrassingly enough was massively exciting. So gives you some idea for my level of enthusiasm about pretty much anything and everything. Went back as a grad, joined their grad program in August, and in September, of course, 9/11 happened, and Lehman's obviously also based in World Trade. Fortunately, given what could have happened, only one person lost their life. Everyone managed to get out of the 44th and 45th floors. But at the time, this is one of the kind of like, I don't want to come across as like it was a challenging and quite frightening experience. Obviously, at the time, London was there was a concern there would also be an attack on London, and a few people were asked whether they would be willing to help on the trading floor because the systems over in New York were currently heating up. Obviously, the air conditioning failed, but weirdly enough, the servers have managed to stay running. And we knew that we didn't have very long before we believed the risk was that those servers would melt. Of course, the reality was the servers were going to be buried under the building when it collapsed. But yeah, a few of us went up to the trading floor, and this was like my first experience of not being given much direction. It was a case of, look, you know what the problem set is, prioritize, go and do it. Everyone's got to do it, and there's nobody going to be able to like give you direction. You're a grad, you've been here a month, go for it. And we just had to try and get as much data and keep the business running. And I was like 21 and just pitched in as I could. But it was like a really good experience in terms of like you basically should seek out to help the business as much as you can, add value, and that will have two effects. One, you will build a reputation as somebody who can just help, rolls the sleeves up and just helps, and has that kind of like you want to help others and you want to help the business. And the second thing is, it's a strong learning experience. You don't sleep for a while when you do things like that. And that was, it was brutal, a brutal introduction, I guess, to finance. But Lehman's was great. The grad program was really great. And I'm actually quite, sorry that they're not here today. But that's my career. Very lucky.
Unfortunately, I came into recruitment after the sort of 08-09 financial crash, but my founders and a few people that work in my firm sort of lived and worked through that. And like you say, I think a lot of people were massively disappointed by how it all went. Okay, so by the way, just out of university, to go to somewhere like Lehman's, was you always the sort of person who wanted to get into finance? Were you really too accustomed, or did you have any idea what finance was, or was it very much that they had the prettiest stand at the grad exhibition when you was in your final year?
So yeah, no, it's a bit like I did computer science at university. I was originally going to go and do maths, electronic engineering, and I had a free slot, so I went over to on the open day. I went to the computer science presentation, and their systems failed, which is hilarious for a computer science department. And the guy who was running it was actually a safety critical systems expert. And he just basically said, oh yeah, this happens, system shut down, but the key thing is how you keep going. And then he continued to give a really great talk on what life was like at university, what the department was like, and what the course was like. And I was like, right, this is the place for me. And then subsequently to that, I actually, Lehman Brothers, milk round, lots of companies came up. And one of the guys that really left a lasting impression, and ultimately became my manager when I started at Lehman's, was he just came in and said, look, we're looking for people who, we don't want people to just basically check in the morning and punch out at night. We're looking for people who want to live and breathe this stuff. World of finance, you're all in or you're not in at all. And now I'm a little bit older and wiser. I think that's a terrible culture, but actually at the time it was precisely what I was looking for. And I didn't really. What I should have done, of course, is applied. Normally, waited for the on-campus recruitment to happen and gone and sat in a room, done the test like everyone else. But instead, I jumped on the train down to London, and I mean. On reflection, this is insane, right? But I jumped straight out to London, got off at Liverpool Street, walked into the foyer in Broadgate Circle, asked if I could speak to the grad recruitment person at reception. And bafflingly, she came down, Anne-Marie Duncan, came down and talked to me in the reception. Was like, why are you here? I was like, well, I've just come down from New York, and so I could get an internship or a grad position. What do you think? And she just looked at me like I was like, one of these people, where did you come from? But she said, okay, we'll come and meet one of the technologists. So I met one of the technologists, and
no way.
At the end of the meeting, I was like, yeah, it'd be great to have you in as an intern. And then, of course, got through my 12-week internship, got a grad offer, and it was great fun. So that was the introduction was not because the dollar signs or streets paved with gold in London. It was like, it's a place where you can live and breathe what you do, and that's what I was looking for. And that's how I got in.
I never knew that story. That is incredible. Why do I recognize the name? Is Anne-Marie Duncan, does she still work at Goldman's?
So Lehman's, so I don't know where she is now, to be honest. I lost touch with her. She actually, amazingly, she did an interview after 9/11. She was actually on BBC News. Wow. She was over in New York when it happened. But no, unfortunately, I've lost touch with her. It's been, 20 years?
That's incredible. You see all these stories nowadays of, people leaving university and standing in Liverpool Street Station with a sign saying, please give me an internship anywhere. But there you go. That was you 20 years ago. That is awesome.
Yeah, I should have decided. Maybe I would have got other offers, but no, I was
Yeah, and that was your first. You literally did that for one firm, turned up at the door, and then next thing you know, you've got a job.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend who came back from. To be fair, I had a friend who did an internship the year before, and he just said, "Hey, it's a really great place. You might find it exciting." And I say there was also the fact that in the back of my mind there was this milk round presentation, and so I just hopped on a train. It was, I mean, on reflection, it's stupid. I look back and like, you know, no one would do this. I certainly would never recommend anyone else. Just like go and pay. I mean, at the time it was 40 quid, but I had a young person's rail card. But you know what? That was material to me at the time, and it still is. But yeah, it was just I tell people this, and they're like, why didn't you go to the normal process? In fact, if someone did that to me, if they turned up in reception now and said, hey, I'm here and I don't know what to do, can you come and interview me? I'd be like, what plan are you on? But no.
No bias whatsoever. You'd like to think that if anyone's going to answer that phone, it's going to be the person that did it 20 years ago, but apparently not.
Yeah, no, I mean, but actually, you know what? Opportunism like that, it sometimes works. But
it's awesome.
Yeah, no,
that's awesome. Great. So let's fast forward 7-ish years now.
Yeah, so financial crisis, right?
Yeah, huge moment number 2.
What you're alluding to. So, so I was obviously an individual contributor doing, and I was, you know, very fortunate. I was part of a really good team, and that's been kind of like a constant theme. I've always looked to work for teams that are, you know, as I said to you, you always look to work with people who are better than you and hire people who are better than you, which does mean that you spend your life being at the bottom of the pile. But hopefully, what you do is you try and find your niche, find the value add that you can do to help the people around you. And one of the things that happened in 2008, as everyone knows, you know, credit crunch, and the place I was at the time to research, there was a view that we needed to be able to trade faster. Latency was the key word, and this was a great place to have this kind of experience. So one was there was a lot of talk about how we could, you know, how fast our trading pipeline is actually really hard to measure. I won't go into technical details, but there are some clangers that we believed, and it's only when we test those assumptions we discovered that they didn't hold. So I spent a bit of time. I remember I went home one weekend. I mean, it's embarrassing now. A massive Excel sheet had like lots of like charts and tables, which indicated how fast parts of our system were, where the low-hanging fruit was. Came in, walked my manager and the CTO through this data. Again, a little bit precocious, probably a little bit on reflection. They probably thought, you know, who the heck is this chancer? And they were like, yeah, this looks interesting. You've got some clear things that we can improve pretty quickly. Latency is absolutely critical to our trading. I mean, it's while not existential, and it turned out it would have been existential. We need to really make some serious improvements. And so, like, to my absolute shock, they said, yeah, we'd like a couple of guys to basically not report into you, but basically you allocate work, make sure these things get done, and tell us how you getting on. So, you know, I went from being an individual contributor to having 2 people say, what do we do now? Like, how can we help? And that was really, and that was the second opportunity. And I had to, you know, you kind of say all this time, yeah, you know, I want to be an authority, I want to run a team, but the reality is this is it's a real privilege, right? And it's also, as I say, you're working with people who you believe are smarter than you, and when they're asking you what they need to do, you feel that you've got to tell them something sensible, because otherwise they're going to call you out. They're going to, and that's been with me for forever. And it worked out really well, and it was a success again because of the people that worked with me. They did a great job, and it kind of talking about the kind of trading incident back in 2001. You work with people that don't really, once they get it, once they understand what the problem is, they don't need prioritization, they don't need direction, they just do the right thing, and you just make sure that everyone is on the same page. And as a result of that, I was given a team, but of course my initial team was me, and I was told to go out and hire someone.
That's amazing, because I remember the first time that I was given responsibilities of a person, and I was actually given a lot of preparation. I had to go out, I had to interview the person, hire them, and by the time that person gets into the firm, and this was a graduate at the time for myself, you sort of build up this idea in your head that everything has to change when you become a leader, and you start reading books on leadership. You go, you know, read Stephen Covey, Simon Sinek, you know, you do all these different bits and bobs, Dan Pink, and try and build this, you know, sort of Rolodex of sort of just information on how to be the best leader possible. And you build it up. In my mind, I know I was thinking, you know, this is a graduate, they're going to go home at night and tell their parents they've got a job and this is my boss, and I'm really responsible for their first step in their career. Whereas for you, almost fortunately, I guess, you didn't have to worry about that. It was almost so natural that you could just carry on being yourself. And do you think, looking back now, that was a huge benefit to your leadership style now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like the one thing is you always remember your, you remember your good teachers, you remember your good managers. And I've been very, very lucky throughout my whole career. I've always had, the people that I've worked with and upper parts of the business have just been, second to none. And have been an absolute pleasure to work with. But I have seen people and I've seen the outcome of bad management, both from a pastoral sense and obviously from more just running a team sense. And I saw that, like you start to see these things and you read about them, you listen to podcasts, you absorb as much information as you can, because the biggest fear of this position is you're responsible for actual people. You're responsible for their career, you're responsible for their well-being, and you're responsible for keeping them, growing them as engineers, as technologists, and as people. And that's a really big responsibility. And the better you are, the more people who work for you, and you have to take care of all of them. So yeah, absolutely. Like what you said, you having a mentor is really useful, but basically having an opinion of what good looks like is really important. And at the end of the day, management is hyper subjective. I'm sure you've had this experience, and you know that what you try to do is you spot what you think other people do that is not so good, and you try to avoid that. The worst thing, of course, happens is you realize that when you're in their shoes and you make the same decision as them, you now see why they made that decision, and you almost kick yourself for ever doubting them in the first place. I remember when they made me work longer hours, or they basically asked me to go above and beyond, and it was a really humdrum project. And then you find yourself doing the same thing to the people that you're responsible for, and then you know why you have to do it, and it's making sure that it's a hard balance.
It is. And there's certain, I think there's certain levels of power. I think there's 5 main levels of power, and it's anything from coercive power, reward power. I think one of the powers that you've probably demonstrated in your career so far has been that expert power. So without having to make people fear you, without having to dangle a carrot and make someone do something, you've just led from the front, almost been the pace setter, and have people just follow you on your way. And by the sounds of things, you've hired people that, if anything, you thought were potentially better than you, to Absolutely. Keep you on your toes and not feel like you keep sort of jumping on top of everyone else to get to the top. You almost hire people that are better to take you up with them, right?
Yeah, you never want to be the smartest. If you're the smartest person in the room, lovely that might sound, you're not being challenged. So yeah, find people who are better than you and help unblock them to make them as productive as they possibly can be, and help them realize everything that they can do.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you've, as I highlighted at the start, you've worked in pretty much 3 different areas in your career, which has been buy side, sell side, and then tech. You've been a leader have you been a leader in all 3?
So not at Lehman's. I was as a grad. So
okay. But the last 3 jobs you've had, so G-Res, Improbable, and Jetstone, you've had leadership positions in all 3.
Yes. Yeah.
How different is that as an experience from both a leader, but also more importantly, just as a general technologist? How different is it between working at a fund and working in a firm like Improbable?
That's a great question. So the domains are different, and weirdly enough, you might think, and that does make a difference. But all 3 firms that I worked at, the hiring bar has been exceptionally high, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a generalist and great at everything. We've generally hired people who are very smart and possibly in specialism, so cybersecurity, distributed computing, quantitative research, and so on. So at the end of the day, the kind of caliber of people that I've worked at all 3 places have been similarly high, and therefore delightful to work with. The domains have been different, so the kind of problem set that you have, and the expertise that perhaps I could bring. So one of the challenges I found at Improbable was much of my experience in finance, some translated, but not all of it. So it's actually fascinating to learn from these guys. Also, the pace at which they operated outside of a business where so Improbable was pure technical risk. They wanted to build the best simulation platform they could using the most cutting edge technology, because the last thing they wanted to do was have someone get ahead of them. So they were at the forefront of everything they did. And that was amazingly challenging and really refreshing. So there was that. Whereas in finance, you tend to be like, you still want to be cutting edge, but you've got to be careful the kind of risks you take, because at the end of the day, you've got to ship a product that generates revenue, generates returns to the business. And that kind of takes me to the second difference, which is at Improbable, we were building a product which we could take pride in because it was being used by others. So you see this kind of, you see this effect and delight and possibly occasional frustration of others using your product. Whereas in the buy side, you're building a product which helps the business. There's a very tight feedback loop. And actually, I'll be honest, that's probably the environment that I thrive most in, where you're very close to the people that are actually using it. You're building a systematic platform that people around you are using, and you're seeing that each new feature gives you hopefully a step change in performance.
The one commonality I think that most of your career has had in terms of the firms you've worked at, albeit they've been in different industries, is that, especially for the last three, they've been a similar size. And you mentioned it, that they're a small firm, but they hire exceptional talent. From a tech perspective, I think one of the biggest things that I've found so far from working, especially on the buy side of the hedge funds, is that the hedge funds that develop the best culture, the hedge funds that develop the best technologists, are the hedge funds that allow you to work under the hood, but more importantly, allow you to make mistakes, allow you to break things. It's really weird to say it in that way, but the firms that allow technologists to break things for the good of the firm and not worry about breaking things leads them to becoming a better firm for it. Whereas if people feel like the second they break something or put something in a position where it doesn't work, then they're going to have to go through levels and levels of sign off and, you know, telling people why you did what you did. And the next time they do it, they're just not going to feel as freely around trying to develop something and make it better. And so they're going to work to the level where they take the least amount of risk possible to get the certain level of results, as opposed to saying, we need to get to the end goal, which is this. So if I need to take this risk and break this and then fix it in order to get there, then I will. And I feel like those sorts of environments that are typically the smaller firms, where it's a more centralized mission statement, vision, tech team, allow people to do that. Do you think that for every firm you've worked at so far, it's been similar?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, there's obviously caveats. You know, what you're not looking for is people just wading in with a hammer. But you're absolutely right. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with regards to culture. If you have a culture of fear, where if anyone makes a mistake, you know, you hang them out to dry, then yeah, you're going to have nobody will innovate. So it's much better to accept the fact that there will be outages and take that in your stride, but always like have a safety net, like understand what the rollback, you know, basically don't go into it with your eyes closed and fingers crossed. Have a rollback. But you're absolutely right. It's critical that you let people, you give people latitude to make decisions and make mistakes and learn from those, provided that those mistakes can be at least caught. And the key thing is, of course, that everyone's human. So what I'd much rather is people made mistakes and felt they could A, discuss those mistakes, and B, talk about how those mistakes, how we can learn from there, right? So there's never a point in saying to someone like, you made a mistake, you screwed up, I can't believe it. When actually, you know what? It could so easily have been me. It could have been anyone else in the team that made that same mistake. And the best outcome is that we all learn from it, and everyone goes on to be better. It's like the whole the aircraft thing. At the end of every successful flight, everyone has a debrief, talks about what went well, what didn't go well, because that's the best time to have that conversation. The last time you want to have it is obviously, when the outcome wasn't such a good landing, right?
Exactly. All right. Well, what I'm finally interested in talking about is the future, because if we look at almost every single sort of role you've had so far, it's changed whilst you've been there. You were at Lehman's, 9/11 happened. You was at GRES, financial crisis happened. With Lehman's, there was a huge global crisis which had to be fixed. With GRES, there was probably the biggest emphasis on latency and execution after it all happened. And then even with Jetstone, you joined when it was probably in phase A, and it's now probably in phase B, if not phase C, in terms of where it is. So in almost every role you've had, from when you started to when you finished, there's been a huge shift in the way that technology is perceived, the way technology is used. We're now in 2020, 2021, when this gets released. What do you think the biggest changes are going to be moving into the next sort of 3 to 5 years within technology? It's a tough question because you probably wouldn't have been able to answer it 5 years ago in terms of where we are today. But is there any trends you're seeing?
Forecaster in the world, and the worst forecaster in the world. What I would say is, it kind of comes back to the same thing. It's like remain open to ideas, basically stay plugged in. I'm delighted. I'm a technologist, and I've been in the industry for 20 years. And that, if you don't keep cloud, I was seeing cloud computing. I always used to think you should have your own data center. Then cloud computing came along, and all those people that have spent millions building their own compute, they're still there. They're still doing well, but other people can spin up so much more quickly now. So I would say, if anything, every time you think you've got a defensive moat every time you think that you've got a little cushy hill that you can stand on, you're going to find very quickly that something will happen, something will disrupt, other people take advantage or spot an opportunity, and then suddenly they'll be at the same level as you. So yeah, what will happen in the future is nothing will slow down, right? And everything you think that is safe, somebody will make easier to, the barrier for entry will lower. It will be easier to, if you think it's hard to trade, so therefore you've locked in a trading advantage, it will become easier to trade in 2 or 3 years' time. So
that's
I
interesting
guess,
you say that, because I think whenever we think about the future, people always feel, and it was actually, I read a book by Peter Thiel who mentioned it himself, and it's about how it's very rare that something ever gets built from scratch that's going to transform the way that things are done. Instead, people take what's already there and develop it to a point where it's then the leading product or way of doing things. And I spoke to someone a few weeks back, and they had a PhD in artificial intelligence from Edinburgh back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I asked him, I said, how come AI has been this huge buzzword and this huge thing for the last 5-10 years, yet you were studying it 20 years ago? And he said, well, it was still there 20 years ago. We just didn't know the extent of what it was and what it could do. And it's only through honing in on it and teaching it and it learning and developing that it's now one of the leading aspects of how people focus on trading in general. So when you talk about cloud computing, everything else you mentioned there, it doesn't necessarily have to mean someone has to revolutionize the way that something's done. It's just about the developments of what's already there. Is that sort of what you're getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you hit a critical mass. You're absolutely right. Nothing just materializes. I mean, AI just didn't spring into existence. You're absolutely right. Cloud compute largely has always been there. You've been able to rent compute or for some time, but there's almost like this convergence of things, a critical mass, and then suddenly, before you know it, there's almost like a pivot or a new way of doing something. And in AI is like, it's one of those, it's graded optimization, right? Problems that were previously really hard, the search space was so spectacularly large that it was intractable to solve in a standard way. But AI suddenly came in and just made the optimization problems tractable, and things that were believed to be impossible, such as the game of Go or many years away, suddenly were being solved. And what's worse is those things become normal. Like you think up until they happen, you think no one will ever do it. We're safe. Or we are, I'm pretty confident in the state of the art. And then the next day, and you're right, there's this huge lead up to it, but suddenly the next day, the world changes around you. And you just have to be ready for that. You wake up every morning and think, is today the day where I've missed something? Is today the day where there'll be something new that we need to really be aware of? And that's part of the fun of being in the technology space.
You can never rest. Right, 2021, what can we expect from you? What can we expect from Jetstone? What can we expect from technology in general? A huge change after the pandemic. Do we know?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you'd asked me this time last year,
are you even going to be in the office?
I was. Yeah, do you know what? I basically, it would be great to put 2020 behind us. I've been very lucky. We've actually, I'm not going to say we've had a lights out year, but we're all still here. We're all and we're actually, planning for future development, which I think is a great place to be. I'm very lucky and delighted to be doing that. I would say it's kind of comes down to everything I've said up till now. It's like whatever advantages that you've got now, whatever, like basically extrapolate forwards and figure out how to really succeed in 2021. I'm hoping that we're not going to have another pandemic. I'm hoping that but there's always going to be obstacles. Again, it's like I said at the very start. When things are thrown at you, the mark of someone is how well you respond to that. People are always going to be knocked down. You're always going to face things that you think are insurmountable. And the people that do well are the ones that get up, dust themselves off, and figure out, and innovate. And I think that's as true in 2020 as it will be in 2021.
Let's put 2020 behind us. Before we finish, for anyone that's watching this on YouTube rather than on the podcast channels, I've been drinking out of a new mug today, the Cadbury's Mini Eggs mug. I did ask James about the Jetstone merch, but unfortunately we're not there yet. So if 2021 can bring anything for Jetstone, the coffee mugs and the t-shirts would be an awesome step. I'm sure we can speak to Ahmed about getting it in.
That would be the highlight of the year. We all get. I mean, I'm thinking my flower mug. So there's got to be something more cool than that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. That 30 minutes has absolutely flown by. I will put all of James's LinkedIn details on the post. So if anyone wants to connect with him, reach out, ask him any further questions from anything you've heard today, please do that. But other than that, James, thank you so much for being on here. It's been an absolute pleasure, and best of luck for 2021.
Thank you. It's been a really good conversation.
Good stuff. See you later.